So I'd like to welcome everyone to our July 15th 10 to top. Probably thinking forward, this probably is a heavy vacation travel week. So if we're in this spot next week, next year, maybe we might pause this one, especially after the 4th of July. But we are pleased to have with us, there are too many Emilys at Duke Energy. There's Emily DeRoberts and Emily Felt. And today we have Emily Felt, that she's the South Carolina Director of Energy Policy for Duke Energy. And as we all know, as Dean said, Anderson is known as the Electric City because we were the first city to have a unlimited supply of electricity in the Portman Shows Arena. Marina Lake, William J. Whitner figured it out. So therefore, we're the Electric City. Just before we turn it over to Emily, I would like to say that we had a big week here in Anderson. Anderson University is starting a football program in the year 2024, and we just hired our first head football coach who has ties to Furman University. Bobby Lamb will be the new head coach at Anderson University. We're excited about that. So, Emily, you ready? We ready, Dean?
Yes.
Cool. Without any further ado, Emily Felt, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Thank you, Dean. Welcome, everyone. First of all, thank you for your continued business. I know that I don't have a choice in who my electricity provider is where I live. They don't provide me with a whole lot of differentiated service. I don't get it on my cell phone or anything. I don't get alerts. I don't really have the option to put solar on my rooftop where I live. And so I appreciate, and I hope you all know that Duke Energy is trying to bring to you all as many choices in how and when to use power as we can in quick order, especially using the new technology that is ubiquitous now. That's not really new, it's been around, but mobile technology. So thank you for your business, your continued business. We're a 100-year-old company that grew up here in the Carolinas, and we want to aim to be a 200-year-old company at the end of this century. So today I've been asked by Dean to talk about the electricity system, and it's top of mind for me because I sit in it every day. This is like, if you're an energy nerd like I am, this is like the best time since electrification initially started, and then the nuclear renaissance, or the nuclear power was built. There have been like 3 heydays of the electricity business. When it first got started, when we electrified the United States in a big way, and especially the South in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And now, as we are changing as a result of our changing climate. Quick quiz here. Does anybody know what this picture is of? What city is this? Any Texans in the group?
Houston.
Houston. All right, I'll buy you a cup of coffee, whoever that was. Good job. This is Houston in the snow 6 months ago. Well, not 6 months, 5 months ago, I guess. Dean, would you mind advancing? So what I'm going to do today is give you an idea of why electric power companies across the world, really, across the, I'd say the industrialized world, are changing rapidly. We are in a period of rapid transition across the globe in industrialized economies, and why we are changing our businesses so rapidly. So the why and the how. To do that, I'm going to use an illustration from Texas. That's why I have the Texas slide up there, of basically the Texas disaster that happened back in February. And that was a 10-day rolling blackout situation, or what we call brownouts, for one of the largest states in the United States, if not the largest. I have to check my population numbers. So basically the why of why is the electricity industry changing so fast? There is now a common acknowledgement that the extremes for which we built the electricity system, from the poles and the wires to the steel and the concrete that we use, we expect now the weather-driven extremes to be more frequent. Now, we always expected some extreme weather, we just didn't expect the frequency of it. And we may not have expected or predicted the magnitude of it. If you just look at what's happening out west, the wildfires out there, the temperatures out there, that is an event that one would have expected once in a century, maybe. Perhaps, but perhaps not at the magnitude that we're seeing it there. Another why is that we're trying to align our business with what customers want. Any of you work in economic development, in investment recruiting and that kind of thing? Site selection, attracting manufacturers to Greenville, Spartanburg, Columbia, that area. Many of those multinationals are asking us, in order for us to build our factory, where here in the state of South Carolina, we need to know what the carbon intensity of the electrons, or carbon intensity of the sources that excited those electrons, that made that electricity. And just a fun fact here, Duke Energy here in the Carolinas is, I think, about 55% clean energy, so zero carbon emission energy. That's one of the highest percentages in the United States as a result of supportive public policies, the workforce, and the know-how to run and operate nuclear power plants safely here in the Carolinas. And then the third reason why I think folks are, or our industry is adapting so quickly is that there has been, necessity is the mother of invention. There has been a real rush to new technologies, and they are coming in at prices that we didn't think were possible 10 years ago. I first started at Duke Energy about 15 years ago. In 2010, I was told that I needed to procure a whole bunch of renewable energy on behalf of the company so we could comply with the state mandate. In North Carolina, they had a mandate for renewable energy. At the time, when we were looking at solar power, it was $5 a watt, or $5 million a megawatt. That's a lot. Now, 10 years later, anybody want to guess where we are with solar power costs? Somebody throw a number out there. So we started with $5 a watt in 2010. Anybody?
Maybe around.
Okay, Stacy Washington said $3. You're very close, Stacy. Stacy works at the energy office. She knows her numbers. For rooftop solar, $3 a watt is very reasonable. For utility scale solar today, the cost per watt is about $1.25, $1.50, $1.25. So we've seen costs really come down. The only downside to solar energy, it only works if you've got the sun. Wah, wah. Then what I'd like to explain or share with you all through the example that I'm going to share in a moment is how we're planning differently. And that means that we're stress testing our assumptions about how much power all of our customers will use in a single day, the single hottest day, the single coldest day, the single hottest hour, and the single hottest minute. Because that's our job. We have a federal license to do that. We are penalized greatly if we are unable to perform on that. If we do have a brownout, there are severe consequences. So we are testing our assumptions and saying, is it reasonable for us to plan for 35,000 megawatts to be our peak on any given day, on our peak days, our peak winter hours in the Carolinas. So just to give you an idea of how energy intense North and South Carolina are. So Duke Energy's system, we plan for a peak. So when I say peak, think of it as a pipe that delivers water, or think of it as a pipe that delivers water to a stadium. And you have to plan for when that day when everybody in the stadium is there, and everybody in the stadium is at the restroom and flushing all the toilets. Okay, so you have to size the pipe so that all of the water that needs to be delivered is delivered at that halftime moment when everybody is going to be using the facilities. And so when you hear me say the word peak, that's the size of the pipe. The amount of water that goes through is the actual electricity that we have to produce. So the size of the pipe in North and South Carolina is 35,000 megawatts. That's roughly the same amount of energy that 6 states in New England in total are planning for. So if you look at the energy market up in New England, the electricity market, it's about they plan for a 34,000 megawatt peak. So this is North and South Carolina from an energy use perspective is greater than most of New England. And that's partly because of our weather. It's partly because of design. We have rural customers who heat their homes with electricity. Up there, they have rural customers who heat their homes with propane or oil. And then also a result of air conditioner load. They don't have air conditioners up there, or at least not many of them. We do. Almost every home has an air conditioner now. So we plan differently. We're designing our stuff differently. We are designing we're designing more and more for floods. So in the eastern part of South Carolina, we are what we call raising our substations. So we're looking at what used to be the 100-year floodplain and saying that flood could happen every decade. So if that flood's going to happen every decade, let's raise our substations, not build it on stilts, but actually use earth to create a mound, and then put our gear on top of that so that even during a flood situation, that energy can be transmitted from one town to the next. And then we're also diversifying our supply in a big way. As I said, we're heavily clean energy today. That's a result of nuclear power and some solar power, hydro, but we aim to diversify it even more. In our last published planning document with the South Carolina Public Service Commission, we put in there, we stress tested what if we added or were able to harness wind energy in a big way. I'm not talking about one turbine demonstration project. I'm talking about 500, 800 turbines in a very, very windy area that creates a supply profile that we could use for some reliable sources. So this is the how and the why. What we're doing in terms of how and why is basically across the industry. Almost every utility, be they investor-owned, owned by members like cooperatives, or owned by state entities, they're looking at things differently. We are no longer talking about the energy transition, we are living it. And with that, I'm going to talk about planning, design, and diversification of supply as applied to an example that Texas gave us, unfortunately, recently. So Dean, if you would move on, please. Okay, Texas again. This is snow in Texas. So let's level set here. What happened in Texas on February 14th? February 14th was a Sunday. I know that I was having a romantic dinner at my dinner table with my spouse, with whom I had not left the house for months at that point. But we were trying to make the best of it on Valentine's night. But in Texas, it was starting to get really, really cold. This was very unusual for Texas. Texas plans for a couple of days of cold. They did not plan for more than 7 days of cold. Depending on the weather chart that you get, you can see that it was actually a 10-day period of extreme cold weather. Now, the duration matters. We'll get to why the duration matters in just a moment, but duration matters if you're relying on a battery. And this is my cell phone. It's my picture of my grandmother on it. Batteries that we use to store energy over long periods of time they're not long duration. And so I'll come back to that in a minute. So this was a situation. Dean, would you go on to the next slide, please? So all energy systems try to meet, all electric utilities and gas utilities are always trying to balance supply and demand to a great degree of accuracy. If they fail to do that, there are economic consequences. There are penalties, there are upset customers if you don't have enough supply. And if you oversupply, if you overshoot the mark, there's cost. And there's nobody to pay for it. So at all points in time, any of you who run businesses, you want to try and estimate just how much people are going to use. So what I've got here is a publicly available document, and this is Texas's estimate of what they thought they would need. So in Texas, the grid and the estimator here is an entity called the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. They're a nonprofit, non-government organization that coordinates all the generation sources in Texas. So ERCOT, or Electric Reliability Council of Texas, said, okay, we're gonna need 76,000 megawatts, roughly twice the size of the Carolinas system here, on our peak, so I'm gonna back up, I'm talking too fast. So what actually happened is the Texas system forecasted that they would need 62. That's the second column. If you start on the left, look at the second column. The forecasters said we're going to need 67,000 megawatts of power on the hottest day, or on the coldest day in the winter. That was their extreme scenario. If you go 4 boxes from the left, or 4 columns from the left, you see 76.8. So that was the actual need for electricity. And then if you look 1 column over to the first of the aqua blue colored columns, what they were actually able to deliver on that cold, cold day, February 15th, the day after Valentine's Day, was 35% less than what they had forecasted. This was an unmitigated disaster scenario. So what I take away from this is that they forecasted an extreme scenario. They said under all, everything went awry, the most we would need would be 67.2. And look at how much more electricity demand they had, 76.8, than they actually forecasted. One of the things about our business is that demand for electricity among residential customers is what we call inelastic. So the more customers need it, the more they demand it. It's very difficult to get customers to lower their demand for electricity on a cold, cold day. And what we're talking about here is a lot of electric strip heating. And each customer, once they feel a chill in the house, they go from 68 degrees to 70. Well, that's pretty small, but multiply it by 30 million customers in Texas. And that becomes a large number. A small number multiplied by a large number is a large number. So that essentially, this was a problem of supply and demand, of economics. let me take you into a little more detail here. So this was a planning error, supply and demand. Dean, would you please move on? Thanks. The other thing I wanted to share with you all about Texas is that Texas is, any Texans here? Y'all, I hesitate to describe Texas culture without a Texan here. So anyways, Texas is part of the United States, but extremely independent. And I'm not talking about their culture or their flag or anything like that. I'm talking about the fact that they're a very unique part of the United States electric grid. There are very few lifelines, so to speak, that tether the Texas electricity system to the rest of the United States. That's by design. It actually allows the electric reliability coordinating Electric Reliability Council of Texas to remain not under the full control of the federal government. And that was something that Texas desired. So by not being connected to other states, they managed to dodge heavy federal regulation around reliability. So the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, which is accountable for reliability in Texas, when they needed power the most, they had very few other boats in the water that they could say, hey, I need help, mayday, mayday. Unlike Texas, we are part, Duke Energy, as well as all of the other electric power suppliers in the Carolinas, are part of what's called the Eastern Interconnection. It's a web and spoke of, or hub and spoke of electric providers throughout the Southeast. And at all days, all points in time, we are sharing and backing each other up. So we have a desk here at Duke Energy. Actually, it's a whole floor of people who, it's just like the movies. There are these big screen TVs and the Weather Channel's playing, CNN's playing, and they're trading energy. And we're always asking the question, is it cheaper for us to generate electricity or buy from somebody who has excess? And so we are doing that in real time every day. Today's hot, but not extremely hot. But I bet somebody has a need for any excess electricity that we have. And so we share it across the Eastern Interconnection. And of course, when we get compensated for it, that's credited to our customers. So it's not like it's not Enron. We're actually crediting any sales of the electric units built for our customers to our customers. Dean, if you would go on, please. Okay, the other unique thing about Texas is that Texas customers, I would say probably 3/4 of Texas customers can choose their electricity supplier. I bring that up as something descriptive, simply because during this blackout situation or brownout situation, rolling blackouts, in Texas in February, there were some residential customers who basically ended up on what's called real-time pricing. So they paid whatever, so if the price in that day spiked of electricity spiked to $9,000 per megawatt hour, and the customer was using some fraction of that, they were at that $9,000 a megawatt hour was passed on to them directly. So you'll hear in the press about what happened in Texas, that some customers ended up with $15,000 bills in February. Again, residential customers have very little ability to say, I'm just going to do without electricity. They don't have backup systems. And for some customers in Texas, they ended up with very high bills because they were on what are called variable rates. For the most part, utilities across the United States, regardless of who owns and operates them, provide residential customers with rates that are kind of like hamburgers. They're not variable. You can't modify them very much. But the one thing that they do provide the customer with is consistency, so that they don't end up with huge electricity bills when wholesale prices change. And just for reference, here on the left, I've got the price of electricity in Texas over time. I wasn't able to get all the data for South Carolina, but South Carolina is that green dot at about 10 cents. And that's residential, and that's not commercial or industrial. Thanks, Dean. Would you mind moving on? Okay, so there's a lot going on in this slide. So this is 7, 8, 9, 10. This is 10 days of Texas. And this is a slide that shows me what happens to each of the sources of electricity. So at Duke, we're relying on many sources, relying on nuclear, solar, hydro, natural gas, fuel oil, some biomass. These are all different sources of electricity, and coal. And each one of them has different operating characteristics. The one that's most variable is the one that's going to be weather dependent. The next most variable is going to be the one that's fuel dependent. So a weather variable resource is going to go up and down with the sun. So if you look at the bottom-most squiggly line that's yellow, that's solar. And this is from a public federal source. They do this, actually, you can get one of these every day for almost any utility. So the bottom yellow line, it goes up and down, up and down. It's that one hump camel. Those are the daylight hours in Texas. So your solar panels produce a lot of electricity only during daylight, and then at night, they pretty much go dormant. I mean, sometimes they produce a little bit when the moon's out, but not much. If you look from Thursday through Monday, in the middle couple of days there, it was really, really dark and overcast in Texas, and it may have been snowing those days. And that's why you got so little output from your solar panels. The other weather-dependent resource in Texas is going to be your wind energy. Now, my company operates a couple hundred wind turbines in West Texas, where it's great and windy. Some of our first facilities went in there. We also operate solar plants in Texas. But you'll see on the green line on February 9th and 10th, the wind output drops precipitously. So the grid operator, ERCOT, that's relying on mixing all these sources together to deliver all uptime electricity to customers, they're having 2 of their sources go offline. So on Monday and Tuesday, between Monday and Tuesday of February 9th and 10th, you see the green line drop down. It went from high output to pretty low and spotty output. And that's a reflection of 2 things: wind speeds, and from what I understand reading the literature, it was also a reflection of ice on turbines. So these big wind turbines have blades, and the blades were picking up ice. What I think about is, ice on airplane wings. And that's not a good thing, because the aerodynamic properties of wings change very much when there's ice on the wings. That's why that de-icing machine comes around at O'Hare and sprays the airplane down. So that's what was happening here. The turbines were not weatherized. So you have wind turbines all over the country, some in very, very cold places. The wind turbines in the very, very cold places were put in with the weatherization, the cold weather package. Anybody ever bought a Subaru or some cars have these cold weather packages with heated seats and stuff like that? Well, with wind turbines, you don't buy heated seats, but you buy a heater that actually keeps the ice from forming on your turbines so that they can continue operating. So you had variability here related to weather on 2 of your sources of electricity in Texas. The other type of generation that was affected in this was also gas generation. So if you look at the beige line, it's the top line. You see Texas, as these other generation sources were going out, Texas, the Texas grid operator said, hey, everybody who has a gas plant, turn it on. And the gas plant was following load for a couple of days until February 14th and 15th. If you look at dot number 5, way up top, it says February 15th, gas generation outages. What was happening there to this fueled source was that they were not able to get fuel to the gas plants. For the most part, natural gas electricity generation relies on pipelines, and it relies on pipelines that are able to use molecules. At certain temperatures, the molecules don't want to move. So they were having difficulties getting the gas to the plants. And so it was at that point, at item number 6, you also had some nuclear outages. And I need to dig into those and understand what was happening. There are certain generation types that will not or cannot operate when steel is at certain temperatures. We've had that experience in South Carolina as well. So basically on, see dot number 7, Monday morning after Valentine's Day, the Texas grid operator notified the federal government that it was going to start, or it was actually on Sunday, number 4, they notified the federal government that we're going to start rolling blackouts. And then they did rolling blackouts for about 2 days. And then on the 7th, or on February 15th, dot number 7, they experienced what's called an emergency load shed event. That's where at the flip of the switch, they didn't have, or they started uncoordinated outages, not rolling blackouts, but they just started turning entire parts of Texas off. They did that to preserve, to mitigate the risk of an entire blackout across the state of Texas. So when I see what happened on February 15th at 1:25 in the morning, it was like the crash cart was in the patient's room, and they were trying to keep the heartbeat going on the grid. So Dean, let's move on. And this is just an idea of what happened in Texas. So given this, I've just put in here a summary of what happened. The root cause actually was, the root cause analysis of what happened in Texas was, one of the root cause analyses was just released this week. I saw that on Twitter and I was going to dig into it. But it was a combination of events that had to do with planning, design, assumptions, weatherization, they had diversified into many sources of electricity, electricity generation, but some of those that were fuel dependent or weather dependent failed to perform in the extreme conditions. So it was really a perfect storm type situation. Do we need to plan for perfect storms? Yes, we do. As the grid operator, that is one of our requirements. So a couple of differences between Texas and Duke Energy. We are vertically integrated. Buck stops with us, not with an electric reliability coordinating council. We are the reliability entity in the Carolinas, and we are answerable to the federal government for any lapses in reliability. The other thing that I wanted to point out is that we're looking very deeply at what happened in Texas and trying to bring that experience into our business and saying, could it happen to us? This is part of our culture of learning. When the disaster struck in Japan at the Fukushima nuclear plant, we sent a team of people over there to understand what happened and how we could prevent it. So we are a learning culture. And then finally, this is kind of our generic statement of our responsibility, but we really do take this seriously. The 24/7, 365, safe, reliable, clean. That is our mantra now. Our vision is our strategy, and it is our tactical plan: safe, reliable, increasingly clean. That's what we do. So Dean, I've got a couple more slides. I don't know if we have time to go into them. This is kind of a speed round. Energy policy, we hear a lot about it on the radio, on news and things like that. Dean, we can go right into it. Yeah. Oh, this is what a grid scale battery storage facility looks like. It looks like that thing that hangs out on the back of a tractor trailer. That is a battery, and on the back of it is a giant air conditioner, because inside are these things that look like server racks that create a lot of heat in the process of storing electricity. Dean, let's go to the next slide. Thanks. Okay, these are our goals as a corporation. We're probably depends on how you measure it. We're one of the top 3 electricity providers in the nation. Last year, we went public with our clean energy goal, and that's to be net zero carbon emissions by 2050 and a 50% reduction over our 2005 levels by 2030. And we're on our way well on our way to reaching that 2030 goal. We also announced a net zero methane goal by 2030. And Dean, next slide, please. This is the fun stuff. So in the backdrop here of the picture is my hometown, Washington, D.C. I'm a Navy brat. And here on the left side, I'm talking about what the federal or what the administration, what actions the White House is taking, what actions Congress is taking. Those are the 2 things that really are going to affect the electricity landscape in the United States. Far from a sweep, we're dealing with divided government in DC. There's certain things that the federal government could do to press electric power suppliers to use more renewable energy. There's not a whole lot they can do without Congress. And so if I were to bet what we're going to end up with by the end of this year or possibly sometime next year, we're probably going to see a 3-pronged approach to climate legislation. We're not going to see one silver bullet carbon tax proposal like has been discussed over the last dozen years. We're probably going to see tax credits for wind and solar extended, which makes them, it changes the economics so that they're in the money. They're cheaper than coal or cheaper than nuclear sooner than they would otherwise have been. We're going to see a lot of R&D spending on things like hydrogen, combustion of hydrogen. We're going to see R&D spending on energy storage so that my 12-hour battery, grid scale battery, or my 4-hour, so grid scale batteries are 4-hour batteries. My cell phone battery is basically a 12-hour battery, depending on how I use it. Grid scale batteries are exactly the same, but the industry standard for that is 4 hours. So it's basically got the grid scale batteries are basically where the first iPhone was in terms of having when you have to recharge it. Yeah. And then we might also see Congress. We might see them pass what's called a clean energy standard, which would be a requirement or a set of carrots and sticks that would cause utility providers to adopt more carbon-free energy faster than they otherwise would have. I'll let you know one interesting fact about our business. We can't just close a coal plant or a gas plant because it has emissions. We're state regulated. So in order to do that, we have to make sure it's, closing it wouldn't impact reliability, but we actually have to go to our regulators and ask permission to do it early. Because when we do that, we're going to have to bring on replacement generation. And that's paid for by our customers. And so that imposition is for example, is that the right thing to do? because it will cause higher costs for our customers if you close a plant earlier than it's supposed to and then buy more energy that's clean on top of that. So it's really not it's not solely our decision to do that. We do that hand in glove with our policymakers because it has implications for our customers when we do that. And Dean, I think that's all I've got. Oh, yep. I just wanted to do a shameless plug for some legislation that we are working on here in South Carolina. So this is my last slide, by the way. On the left, you see the storm tracks of all the major storms that went through South Carolina in the last 7 years. And you see what we spent in a very short amount of time to restore power to our customers. All total, it's about, I want to say $175 million over 7 years. We have a bill that we'd like support for in the state legislature that would allow us to basically finance the costs of restoring power through a bond-like mechanism called securitization. A lot of states have mechanisms that allow utilities to raise money for unexpected things like storms. If you're a cooperative in South Carolina, when you spend money on a storm, you take the receipts and you give it to FEMA. And FEMA reimburses you for, I think, 80% of the cost of a storm restoration. As an investor-owned utility, that's not the case. When we restore power, that cost typically then is then reflected in the future in the cost of serving all of our customers in the future. On the right side here, that is not a lake, but that is what we call a substation that has been flooded. It has been inundated by water. That is a bad, bad situation. That means that several thousand or maybe tens of thousands, based on the size of this substation, are out of power. So I believe we completely rebuilt the substation and raised it off the ground. And with that, Dean, that concludes my talk.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Emily. I have learned quite a bit, and I'm glad I don't have to explain it to anyone, because you have obviously have a amazing understanding of these challenges, and I think it's quite interesting, to see what happens in other places, and then how you have to plan and prepare for that in your community, even if you have somewhat different situations. We have several questions in chat. We really don't have time to take them as a group, but if you have a few minutes, if you could stay in the chat and maybe answer some of these questions. I do want to have you answer one before we move on, if you don't mind, because I think it's a really good one from Doug Stevenson. It fits to what we hear about some of these things as the general public. It's, how is Duke being proactive to prevent hackers from taking over the local grid? So of all the questions, that's probably the one that can be answered the quickest and easiest. So do you mind taking that one on?
Yeah, we have, the federal government has what are called cybersecurity incident protocols that really govern, if you're looking at the slide still, these poles and wires that you see here, at the distribution level, like as the meter that goes into your home, we have some physical security on that meter so it can't be tampered with and stuff like that. But I'll tell you what I've learned about cybersecurity is that the weakest link in the chain is not an unlocked door or a fence that isn't high enough or anything like that. It's really you and I and what we click on. So they're doing, my company quizzes all of us. So we're a company of about 30,000 individuals across 20 odd states, probably 30,000 vendors who work side by side with us every day. We are quizzed and tested to see whether or not we click on clickbait, Amanda, would you say probably every 2 weeks or so, we get some type of clickbait, and they're trying to get us to click on a nefarious link. So they're testing all 30,000 of us at all times. Human beings are probably one of the weakest links here. And in our offices, there is no way for me to get material off of my computer except by sending it electronically. I'll be honest with you, to prepare for cybersecurity incidents, the costs are growing. It's not great, but it is a fact of our business that to protect, we are spending more money on expertise. And by the way, if any of you all are cybersecurity experts or engineers, send me your resume. I understand you all are in short supply, but that's basically what we're doing. We're doing what a lot of companies are doing. The difference being that we have federal mandates, or what are called SIP, cybersecurity incident protocols, rules that are coming from the federal government around these things that are kind of hastening everything. Yeah.
You know, my wife always says we wish people would use their powers for good instead of evil. And, you know, if the people who do all these cyber attacks would spend their time and energy on good elements as opposed to trying to be nefarious, imagine what power could be done. So, Emily, thank you so much. And like I said, if you have a few minutes, if you can answer some of those other questions in chat, we would greatly appreciate it. But again, thank you for your insight, for sharing that information. And Duke Energy is such a great partner, not just for TATT at the Top, but really across the upstate. And so thank you for sharing with us and for all that you all do to make sure that we have power and Zoom and all these other things that we know we need. So, you know, thank you for being with us today.
Absolutely. What I'm going to do, Dean, is see if I can copy and paste these questions and then answer them in a written format, and then I'll send them to you, and you can send them to your colleagues at 10 at the Top.
Perfect. We'll put it in the summary that goes out tomorrow. So that'll work really well.
Thanks.
So with that, we're gonna do our resource updates. We're really pleased to have Brandon Worley, who is the executive director and founder of Upstate Carolina Adoptive Golf. Brandon, I'll turn it over to you. And Erica is going to Brandon did an article in our newsletter that went out today. She's going to put a link to that in the chat. But Brandon, if you'll share a little bit about Upstate Carolina Adoptive Golf.
Awesome. Thank you, Dean. Thanks for having me today. So my name is Brandon Worley. I started Upstate Carolina Adoptive Golf, I want to say back in October 2018. And how it came about was essentially in my master's program, working on my master's of science in positive psychology out of Life University in Georgia. I simply had volunteered for an opportunity. That was just called Intro to Golf. And when I went out there that day, it wound up being a state-ran program through Georgia State Golf Association. And it was for children that had cognitive disabilities or were visually impaired. And just out there that day, I had my first experience working with a visually impaired child who was 8 years old. I never touched the club and just kind of gained her trust, put her in all right golf positions, set her up to hit her first shot. She turns back, turns through, makes contact with the ball, goes in the air down the fairway. And it was just kind of one of my aha moments where I turned around, saw the mom in tears of joy and just kind of looked up and wanted to know what I could do next as far as getting this kind of program to the upstate. And essentially, I found it as a resource for veterans to use it more as a therapy when they got out the service to, help with integrating back into civilian life and, having some kind of outlook, to get away, just kind of have a good time. And so from there, it kind of evolved to not just veterans, but also adults and children in our community. And currently, we had an adaptive golf coach training back in April 2019 at Clemson University, and partnered with the PGM program, get some students involved through rec therapists. And kind of since then, we started our first clinic in July 2019 out at Top Golf, and that was the start of our third Monday of the month Veteran and Community Adaptive Golf Clinic. It's more built for socialization, building camaraderie, and basic introduction to the game. Essentially, we invite veterans, adults, and children from the community, and anybody that wants to come out and observe or just be a part of it. And I want to say, from the time we started in July 2019, I might have had 4 to 5 participants. Whereas here in 2021, the past 3 months, I've had over 46 participants show up at these Top Golf events. And I've got, well over 50 trained volunteers that know how to work with different disabilities. So essentially, it's really just providing more of a resource, providing opportunities to help others discover their abilities. Right now, a lot of our programming is in the Greenville area. I do some work in the Clemson and Anderson area as far as with veterans and Clemson University. And then right now, we're really trying to push more out towards the Spartanburg area, try to get some programs going out that way. Trying to partner with the Mary Black Foundation on getting the startup program out that way. But that's just a quick gist of kind of what the Upstate Carolina Adaptive Golf is about. Really more as a resource or a therapy, using golf as for another individual's therapy. I've had multiple success stories from individuals in wheelchairs, telling me they'd never be able to hit golf ball, that I was crazy, to where now they don't miss a clinic. They come out and make sure they can show everybody what they can do with that golf club in their hand. So it's been pretty rewarding on my end to see, not only the growth that we've had, between, because in order for nonprofit to sustain, you definitely got to bring in some profit. So, in 2019, we might have brought in 32 grand. 2020 was at 42, 48 if you had all the in-kind items. And then year to date, 2021, we've raised over 84 grand. And so being able to purchase different adaptive golf equipment that allows other people who are in wheelchairs to be able to stand upright. And some of these individuals, it's the first time they're standing up in their life. So just, that moment right there, getting some blood flowing through their heart that they haven't ever felt before is a, eureka moment for them. But yeah, we pretty much work with anybody with any type of physical or cognitive challenge. So, and trying to get them, motivated and stay positive and, create goals for themselves. And yeah, it's been really rewarding. It's become a full-time job for me at least, but I definitely love it. And it doesn't feel like much work on my end, even though it is a lot of work, but it's definitely very rewarding. So thank y'all for having me.
That is awesome, Brandon. Thank you so much for sharing. And if anyone's looking for more information, it's in the article. And Brandon, if you want to put your contact information in the chat for anyone as well, that might be helpful to them. But a great program, and just really one of those really neat things to know that's being done, and appreciate you taking the time to have done that and see the value. And I'm sure you get a lot of, as you said, a personal positive feelings from being part of that. So next, we're going to ask for a quick update from Michael Hildebrand, the director of the Upstate Mobility Alliance. A lot going on around mobility. And Michael, I know we only have a couple minutes, but if you could share a little bit about what you're doing, we'd greatly appreciate it.
Sure. So actually what I'll do is I'll just recognize a couple of communities that are doing some really great work. First, Greenwood on July the 1st started their transit service. It's a focus primarily around medical transports, but they also focus on a 5-mile radius around downtown Greenwood. And so it's a really great service, and glad to get that started. Abbeville has also sent a grant request in. They should hear next Friday. And that money would allow them to start a transit service similar to what Greenwood's doing, and will really focus around medical transports as well. So also in Greenwood, today I was down there for a lunch and learn where they're discussing van pools and how can van pools help companies in Greenwood County not only attract workers, but also retain workers as well. Another community that's doing a lot of really great work with van pools is Spartanburg. At the end of June, Spartanburg City voted to use some of their funds to provide some subsidies for a van pool pilot for 2 years. And along with the Chamber in Spartanburg, they're recruiting businesses right now. So just want to recognize those communities. They're doing a lot of really great work, and happy to be working with them.
Great, thank you, Michael. And I know the Mobility Alliance also has a neighborhood program that we'll have you on another time to talk about, and really doing some valuable connecting around how we increase access to transportation in the region and move people and goods across the upstate. So thank you for that. And real quickly, Erica will put in the chat our upcoming events for TATT at the Top. We've got a couple of things going on. Our TATT Reconnects are continuing. If you're interested in the mobility conversation, a week from tomorrow, the 23rd, our TATT Reconnect will be here at our office in Greenville, and it will be focused on mobility and transportation. Michael and Will Whitley from Michelin and Keith Scott from Electric City Transit, among others, will kind of lead that conversation. So if you're interested, you can participate in that event. If you would love to go see part of God's country here in the upstate, tomorrow we are going to be in Abbeville for a TATT Reconnect at WC Tel. I believe Shannon Sears is on the call today, and he is going to host us. So if you're in Lawrence or Abbeville or Greenwood or Anderson and would like to join us at West C Tel tomorrow, we'd be glad to see you there. And we're going to continue some of the reconnects throughout the summer. I've mentioned before, put August 30th on your calendar. That is our big Blues, Brews, and Barbecue Expo at GSP Airport. Tickets are on sale. If you're a TATT at the Top partner, as many on this call are, you should have received information about your complimentary tickets and expo tables availability. So we're real excited about that. So Terrence, even with Justine not here, we're able to get done on time. So I will turn it over to you for some final words. And again, thanks to everyone for being with us today. And our next session is July 29th with the topic being creating a safer upstate.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks. You did. You got us in here before. I doubted you for a second, but you did it. So good pitch hitting there for Justine. Again, thank you for Emily giving just a wealth of information in regards to energy and providing some insight on her company, Duke Energy. Brandon, that's great stuff. Glad I was able to hear that. And Michael, as always, thank you for what you're doing for mobility in upstate. I hope everybody can enjoy the rest of the day, get through Friday, and have a good weekend. And we'll see you at the next TATT Chat. Thanks.
Bye. Bye, everybody.